I remember the exact moment I stopped being a husband and started being a ghost. It was a Thursday morning, cloudless. The kind of bright, blue-ski day that looks like it should bring good news, but has a habit of disguising disaster. I walked into the central office of Elridge Hotels like I had for the past 12 years, tie slightly crooked, coffee in hand, and half a dozen thoughts already crowding my mind. Renovation budgets. Staffing in Scottsdale. That new boutique location in Napa. I was in the zone. Focused. Building something. And then I saw them. My wife, Rebecca, sitting in the leather chair I used to call mine, legs crossed like she was born to rule something she never lifted a finger to build. And beside her, perched like a vulture in a tailored Armani suit, was her brother, Chase. Yeah, Chase. The finance genius who couldn't keep a job before Rebecca let him worm into our family business through a board seat 2 years back. Now here he was, flashing veneers and smugness. "Hey," I said, pausing in the doorway. "What's going on?" Rebecca didn't even make eye contact. Chase stood up instead. "We're making changes," he said, voice syrupy with fake regret. "Effective immediately, you're no longer with Elridge Hotels." I blinked. "Excuse me. You've been relieved of your duties," Chase said. Then, like he'd been rehearsing it in front of a mirror, he added, "You don't have the skills to run a business, you little man." Little man. That phrase just hung in the air. Like a bad smell. My fingers curled slightly around the coffee cup, but I didn't throw it. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. That was the first and only victory I took from that room that day. Instead, I smiled at him. Slow and sarcastic. The kind of smile that says, "You think this is checkmate, don't you?" "Yes, that makes you the big man now," I said, taking a step forward. "Hope you like cleaning up the mess." Chase turned a little pale then. Just a flicker. Barely noticeable. But it was there. Because I knew something he didn't. My wife, my beautiful, ambitious, two-faced wife, was horrified. I finally locked eyes with her, and I saw the fear she didn't expect to feel. Not yet. She expected me to yell, to rage, to burn the place down. But I didn't. I simply walked past her, picked up the box of my belongings, already packed, how thoughtful, and strolled out of the office like I was headed to lunch. Because here's the thing about betrayal. The first time it hits, it knocks the wind out of you. But if you're smart, you get back up while they're still busy celebrating. And you remember everything. Every face. Every word. Every smug little grin. And you plan. That afternoon, I didn't go home. I drove straight to the property records office downtown. You see, when we were building this company, when Rebecca and I were still pretending to be in love, I insisted on one thing, my name on the deeds. Not just the contracts, but the real ownership documents. And Rebecca, in her endless need to play the cool wife card, never questioned it. She wanted me to feel secure, trusting, complacent. Well, I wasn't. I pulled up every property, every LLC, every corporate filing I had touched, and I took notes. Because they might have stolen the business title, but they didn't own everything. Not yet. You don't spend over a decade building a company from scratch without leaving fingerprints, strategic, stubborn, legal fingerprints. That day, as I sat at the records office, I realized something. Rebecca and Chase had no idea what I'd built underneath the surface. On paper, I wasn't just operations manager or co-founder. I was the man who drafted the original bylaws. The man who tied our properties into interlinked holding companies, each with their own clauses. And most importantly, the man who owned 27% of every last brick, bed, and backroom minibar in the entire Elridge chain. Not bad for a little man, huh? The woman at the counter, a sweet older lady with glasses too big for her face, asked if I needed anything notarized. I smiled. "Not today," I said. "Just looking at my legacy." She probably thought I was nuts. But I was already 10 moves ahead. I made copies of everything legally, quietly. Had them scanned, encrypted, and saved in multiple cloud drives by that evening. Redundancy is a beautiful thing. I even mailed a flash drive to a P.O. box I hadn't touched in years. A little insurance policy. And then I went home. Home. What a joke. It didn't feel like home anymore. Rebecca wasn't there, of course. She was working late, which used to mean strategy meetings or expansion plans. Now I knew it just meant whispering with Chase, plotting how to erase me like some rookie intern. The betrayal didn't even burn anymore. It was cold. Surgical. Her perfume still lingered in the hallway. Expensive. Sweet. Artificial. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the study, the same room where we'd celebrated opening our first 5 hotels. I remember her on the couch, barefoot, laughing, swirling red wine in her glass, telling me how proud she was of us. Of me. That night, she wore my hoodie, the one with the frayed sleeves and the logo from our first location in Maine. Now that image felt like a memory from someone else's life. A ghost couple in a house full of lies. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I started writing notes, timelines, asset lists, key players in the boardroom. Everything I could use. Everything they might try to twist or erase. By sunrise, I had a folder. I labeled it Resurrection. Because that's what this was going to be. Not revenge. Not rage. Resurrection. The next week was quiet. Too quiet. Rebecca avoided me. Barely spoke. Her way of pretending this was a business decision and not a personal ambush. I played along. Smiled. Made coffee. Kissed her on the cheek like nothing was wrong. But inside, I was fire. I started contacting old friends. Lawyers, consultants, even an old contractor who helped build our first property. One by one, they confirmed what I suspected. Chase was cutting costs fast, pushing expansion even faster. He was betting on flash. Speed. Headlines. He had no idea how to run lean. No sense of pacing or patience. He was going to bleed the company dry trying to prove he was a visionary. Perfect. I went to visit Clarissa next, our former head of HR. She left 6 months ago, fed up with Chase's backroom deals and Rebecca's passive-aggressive leadership. I brought her coffee and an NDA. She brought receipts, literal receipts. Emails. Memos. Salary cuts hidden under department realignments. Favoritism. Internal complaints swept under rugs. Gold. Why are you doing this? She asked me as I stood at her door. I looked her in the eye and answered the only way I could. Because I built this damn thing. And I'll be damned if I let them destroy it while they pretend it's progress. She nodded, slow and solemn. They think you're out of the game. I smirked. They're not even playing the same sport. Back at the house, Rebecca finally broke the silence. We should talk, she said one night, standing in the doorway like she still owned the room. I closed my laptop slowly. Sure, I said, voice calm. Let's. She sat down, folded her hands like a therapist. I didn't want it to be this way. But Chase and I agreed the company needed stronger leadership. You weren't adapting. I studied her. The practiced expression. The tone. Everything about her felt rehearsed now. Plastic. You mean I wasn't adapting to being stabbed in the back? I asked. Yeah, I've been a little slow on that. Don't be dramatic, she said. This is business. No, Rebecca, I said. It stopped being business the second your brother carried my things out of the office like I was a disgraced janitor. It became personal the moment you sat in the chair I built for us and pretended like you didn't know whose sweat paid for it. Her jaw clenched. But she didn't argue. Because she knew. She knew what she'd done. And now, for the first time, I saw it. She was afraid. Not of me, but of what I knew. What I was capable of. She had declared war on the man who built her empire. And I hadn't even fired the first shot. They always say blood is thicker than water. But I've learned that doesn't mean loyalty, it just means the stab goes deeper when it's someone who shares your last name. Chase and Rebecca didn't just want me out. They wanted me erased. As if I was a footnote in their origin story, some idiot they could write off as a first draft mistake in their perfect little success narrative. But there's one thing they underestimated, my memory. And my patience. A week after our talk, Rebecca left town for a hotel conference in Denver. Or at least that's what she told me. Her suitcase was missing, sure. Her charger was gone, sure. But she didn't take the blue folder, the one labeled Strategy Q3, Q4, that she never traveled without. Curious, right? So I did what any discarded husband with a vendetta and a security clearance would do. I checked the company jet logs. No Denver. Instead, Miami. A single, one-way flight. Booked under Chase's name, with an extra seat added last minute. And a hotel reservation at a 5-star suite, under Elridge Executive Retreat. Yeah, sure. That night I sat alone in the kitchen, lights off, whiskey glass sweating in my hand. It wasn't the cheating that got me. That would have been almost too easy to rage about. No, it was the insult. They thought I was blind. That I'd roll over. That I'd accept being humiliated and tossed aside while they turned the company into some incestuous throne room where they got to rule unopposed. But the thing about betrayal is it teaches you the value of silence and the power of patience. The next morning, I called up someone I hadn't spoken to in a while, Daniel. My old friend from university. Back then, We used to joke that he'd either end up in a courtroom or running one. Turns out, he did both. He was a private investigator now. The good kind. The kind who finds what people try to bury. When I told him what I needed, he didn't even hesitate. Miami, huh? He said. You want photos, flight manifests, pillow mics, the works? I chuckled. Just the truth. You know, the stuff they're scared to say out loud. Give me a week, he said. I'll dig until I hit bone. And I knew he would. Back at home, I started preparing for what came next. I wasn't going to walk back into Elridge Hotels with a lawyer and a tantrum. That's the kind of petty move they would expect. No, I was going to rebuild quietly, precisely, with dignity. I was going to remind the world that the real brains behind the Elridge empire wasn't some magazine-ready power couple, but the man they tried to bury under their ambition. First step? Funding. I liquidated a few personal investments. Not enough to raise suspicion, but enough to open an LLC of my own. I called it Northlight Holdings. Clean. Neutral. Not flashy. Just the kind of shell company that wouldn't raise a single eyebrow while I began scouting properties. And I did. In fact, I already had my eye on one, an abandoned boutique hotel outside of Sedona. Gorgeous bones. Terrible condition. But with the right renovations, the right branding, it would be the beginning of something new. Something mine. Then Daniel called. You're going to want to sit down for this, he said. I'm already sitting, I replied. He chuckled grimly. Then brace yourself anyway. And then he laid it out. Photos. Of Rebecca and Chase. Holding hands in the elevator. Entering the suite together. Leaving hours later, her hair wet from a shower, his shirt untucked. This wasn't just a brother-sister bond gone too far. It was betrayal of a different magnitude. And it wasn't new. Daniel traced the timeline. Months. Maybe years. It had started long before they took control of the company. Back when I still believed we were building a future together. Back when I was financing their weekend business trips. The bile rose in my throat, but I swallowed it down. This change anything? Daniel asked. I stared at the photos on my screen, Rebecca's face laughing, lips parted, the same expression she once wore for me. No, I said. It just confirms what I already knew. Most men would lose it after seeing this. I'm not most men, I said. And I don't lose. I document. I printed out the images. Put them in a sealed envelope. I didn't deliver it to Rebecca. Not yet. No confrontation. No melodrama. I just filed it. Because the next time I walked into a boardroom, it wasn't going to be with an accusation. It was going to be with proof. With control. With the calm, methodical detonation of the Elridge illusion. Because family may have betrayed me. But legacy? Legacy was still mine. You ever notice how quiet it gets right before a storm rolls in? Not windless. Not lifeless. Just still. Like the whole world is holding its breath. That's where I was, sitting in the eye of a storm I didn't start, but when I sure as hell was going to finish. Because once I had the proof of Rebecca and Chase's special bond, the playbook changed. No more guessing. No more giving them the benefit of the doubt. The truth was on paper now, on glossy, high-resolution paper that I kept locked in a safe behind a painting she had picked out. Irony's a hell of a decorator. I knew I couldn't take them down in court. Not directly. Incestuous betrayal doesn't come with a clause in the company charter, though it damn well should. No, I had to hit them where it hurt. And that was credibility. The board of Elridge Hotels was mostly made up of legacy names, investors who had bought in after our third expansion phase, when the money started flowing like wine. They liked numbers. Predictability. Quiet returns. You know what they hated? Scandal. I started reaching out to a few of them. Casual calls at first. A check-in here. Hey, how's the Palm Springs property treating you? There. I never mentioned the coup, the betrayal, or the affair, not yet. I let them bring it up. And sure enough, they did. You doing all right, man? Heard about the leadership shakeup. Was it mutual? Seemed sudden. Hope there's no bad blood. Rebecca and Chase are talking expansion into South America now. Aggressive timeline. Ah, there it was. Aggressive. The one word corporate men use when they mean terrifyingly reckless. I leaned in just enough. Dropped phrases like strategic misalignment, financial exposure, and irregular acquisition structure. Nothing too sharp, just enough to plant the seed that maybe, just maybe, they'd backed the wrong horse. And then I let it sit. Let it grow. Because fear is a better tool than fury. Meanwhile, I put all my energy into Northlight Holdings. The Sedona property was mine within 2 weeks, thanks to a foreclosure auction and one well-placed bid. I brought in the contractor I trusted, gave him a blank check and 2 rules. Restore the bones. Keep the soul. Make it better than anything Elridge ever touched. He got it. Some people just understand legacy. Others just imitate it. While the renovation started, I hired a brand consultant, someone new, someone unconnected to my past life. She asked me what I wanted the new hotel's identity to be. I told her this. Clean lines. No fluff. It needs to feel like peace with a backbone. A place for people who built something with their own hands and need a place to breathe. She nodded. You want to build a sanctuary? No, I said. I want to build a reminder. And then, right on cue, Rebecca came home from her conference. She didn't look me in the eye. Didn't say much beyond the usual pleasantries. Funny how betrayal makes a person awkward in their own house. I didn't bring up Miami. I didn't mention the photos. I didn't ask about Chase. Instead, I handed her a small envelope over dinner. No note. No explanation. What's this? She asked. Proof, I said, of how well you and your brother work together. She paled before she even opened it. Her hands trembled, just slightly, as she unfolded the photos. I watched her jaw tighten, her lips part slightly in some rehearsed excuse that never quite made it to sound. You were spying on me? No, I said. I was documenting. That's what good founders do. Her eyes narrowed. What do you want? I already have what I want, I said. But if I were you, I'd call Chase. Let him know the board's about to get real interested in your extracurriculars. She swallowed. Hard. Then stood up without another word and left the room. No screaming. No apologies. Just shame. It wasn't loud. It was perfect. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Because war doesn't always start with a bang. Sometimes, it starts with a whisper across a boardroom table. And I had just lit the fuse. It was an unassuming Tuesday morning when the email went out, just a bland little subject line in a sea of corporate nonsense. Quarterly strategy session, attendance mandatory. Signed by Rebecca. CC to the board. But I saw the twitch behind it. She was rattled. Chase was probably pacing some penthouse suite with a scotch in one hand and a nervous tick in the other. They knew the whisper campaign was working. They'd heard the shift in tone, the questions, and worse, the silence. Because in business, silence is never just silence. It's suspicion. And suspicion spreads faster than fire. I walked into that boardroom like a ghost no one had invited, but whose seat was still warm. 7 of them around the table. Mostly men. 2 women. All dressed to impress, with their obligatory leather folders and Mont Blanc pins. Rebecca sat at the head. Chase beside her, like a coiled snake pretending to be a co-CEO. The air was stiff with tension and something else. Fear. Some of them smiled at me. Some didn't. No one asked what I was doing there. Because technically, I still own 27%. Rebecca opened with a stiff little monologue, corporate fluff about vision alignment and streamlining executive oversight. Chase chimed in about long-term international growth. They clicked through a slide deck like they were auditioning for TEDx Stockholm. I didn't speak. Not at first. I just waited until they reached slide 12, the one titled Leadership Transitions, Legacy to Future. That's when I stood up. And I slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Quiet. Surgical. No dramatics. The kind of move that's scarier than a shouting match, because it means you've already done your homework. What's this? One board member asked, looking down. Financial discrepancies, I said. Minor, at first. But when paired with internal emails and the restructuring of contractor agreements under Chase's sign-off, I let it hang. Another board member, Carol, sharp as a damn scalpel, leaned forward. These emails are real? Verified by a third party, I said, calmly. Rebecca stiffened. Chase leaned forward like he was about to bark. None of this is illegal, he snapped. I never said it was, I replied, smiling coldly. But unethical? Questionable? Reckless? That's for the board to decide. And then, I pulled out the second envelope. Photos. Miami. Suite number. 2 people. 1 bed. Enough, Rebecca snapped. But the room had already shifted. They weren't just seeing co-CEOs anymore. They were seeing a scandal wrapped in expensive suits and bad judgment. Looks like personal and professional boundaries have blurred, one of the older board members muttered. Someone else coughed, awkward, guilty, amused. And just like that, they were bleeding. The vote didn't happen that day, but the ice cracked. And in business, when the ice cracks, you don't wait for the splash. I left that boardroom without a title, without a job, but with something far more valuable. Leverage. Back at home, Rebecca was waiting. She was shaking, pacing. You said you wouldn't go public, she hissed. I didn't, I said, pouring myself a drink. I just spoke to people who matter. She stared at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. Maybe she didn't. Because the man she betrayed? He's gone. The one standing here? He's the reckoning. A week passed. No press releases. No internal memos. Just tension thick enough to carve with a steak knife. Rebecca went cold, shuffling between rooms, barely meeting my eyes. Like sharing space with me was radioactive. And Chase? He did exactly what I predicted he'd do. He panicked. You can always tell the difference between people born into money and people who earned it. Those born into it? When the water rises, they splash. Loud. Erratic. Desperate. Like Chase. He called an emergency board meeting without telling Rebecca. Now that was interesting. Carol tipped me off. He's moving fast. Trying to frame this whole thing as a hostile shareholder smear campaign. Wants to vote you out of the ownership circle entirely. I smiled. Good. Let him. See, Chase hadn't bothered to read the bylaws from the early days. Or if he had, he assumed I was bluffing. But tucked into the original founding documents, back when we were a 3-hotel operation and every dollar counted, was a clause I'd insisted on. No shareholder with over 25% equity can be removed, diluted, or overridden without unanimous board approval and consent from the founding partner. That founding partner? Me. So if Chase wanted to cut me out, he'd have to get me to agree to it. And if he tried to do it illegally? Well, that's where things got fun. I showed up uninvited to that emergency board meeting. Same boardroom. Same tension. But this time, no Rebecca. Just Chase and 6 very uncomfortable shareholders. Didn't realize we had company, Chase muttered. Your assistant must have forgotten to update the guest list, I said, setting a folder on the table. Let's move forward, he snapped. As many of you know, there's been an ongoing effort to disrupt our leadership, originating from someone with a personal vendetta and a clear financial motive. I'm proposing a special motion to remove him from the ownership group, effective immediately. He was trying to look calm, but his left hand kept tapping the table like a metronome counting down his unraveling. Carol raised an eyebrow. Does the clause in the founding agreement allow for that? We've retained legal counsel to challenge that clause, Chase said, too quickly. And that's when I dropped it. The second folder. This one labeled Maintenance Budget Fraud, YDD. Line items. Vendor names. Fake invoices. Chase, I said, did you really think no one would notice that you funneled $1.2 million through Southwest Janitorial Consulting? A company that doesn't exist, and an address that belongs to a now-defunct dog grooming service in Tucson. He froze. Dead silence. I leaned in. Calm. Ice cold. I called the number on the invoice. You know who picked up? A guy named Roy who cleans bird cages for exotic parrots. Someone at the table snorted. Another exhaled loudly. Chase's face turned the color of spoiled milk. This is slander, he barked. No, I said. This is forensic accounting. And the board has a fiduciary duty to investigate. Carol cleared her throat. I suggest we take a 5-minute recess. But she didn't wait for agreement. She stood. The others followed. And just like that, Chase was alone. And defeated. Later that evening, I got a text from Carol. Interim vote next week. Rebecca's abstaining. You've got the numbers. I stared at that message for a long time. Not because I didn't expect it, but because it hit me. I wasn't just clawing back what they took from me. I was becoming something else. Untouchable. Back at the house, Rebecca sat by the fireplace, wine in hand, staring into nothing. I tried to keep him from dragging you down, she said softly. I didn't respond. She looked at me, eyes tired. It wasn't supposed to go this way. I looked back at her, really looked. And I saw it. The regret. The fear. Maybe even the shame. But not love. That was long dead. No, I said. It was supposed to go your way. Then I walked upstairs. And for the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of fire. It was raining the day of the interim vote. Not the dramatic, thunderclap kind of rain. Just a cold, gray drizzle, nature's version of a quiet funeral. Appropriate, I thought. Because something was about to die today. And it wasn't me. I arrived at the Elridge Executive Building early. Wore the same suit I wore the day Rebecca and I signed our first partnership contract, back when we were still us. I thought it might bring me closure. It didn't. It just fit looser now. Funny how betrayal trims the fat. Inside, The mood was funereal. Rebecca sat off to the side, sipping water like it might steady her hands. No jewelry, no makeup, just corporate black and a face that had seen the headlines. Yes, headlines. Because the board didn't leak Chase's fraud. I did. 2 nights before the vote, I handed an anonymous packet to a reporter at the Ledger, a clean, business-first paper with just enough teeth. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Co-CEO accused of diverting funds through bogus cleaning contracts. Sources close to the company call for full audit. The article didn't mention Rebecca by name. I made sure of that. Because I wasn't after personal destruction. I was after leverage. Let her stew in guilt and whispers. That was worse. The meeting opened with silence. Chase wasn't even present. Gone underground. Probably huddled in some hotel room. Phone turned off, trying to lawyer up with money he no longer had access to. Carol stood. In light of recent findings and the urgent need for restored confidence, the board is calling for an interim executive leadership vote. One by one, they raised their hands. All of them. Even the 2 fence-sitters who hadn't returned my calls last week. It was unanimous. Rebecca didn't raise her hand. She didn't need to. The message was clear. Elridge Hotels was no longer hers. When it came time to nominate a replacement, I waited. Let them squirm. Then I said, I'm not interested in taking the CEO title. I've already built this company once. I don't need to do it again. The room stiffened. But, I continued, I'll accept a position as Chief Oversight Officer, reporting directly to the board, with full transparency on all financial operations moving forward. Independent, unaffiliated, and answerable to no one except this table. That silence. That was respect. They voted again. Unanimous. I had just made myself the most dangerous man in the company. The watchdog. The gatekeeper. The ghost in the system. After the vote, Rebecca caught me in the hallway. You don't want it back? She asked. I don't need it back, I replied. You already ruined the title. Why would I want your ashes? She looked down, voice barely audible. Do you hate me? I stared at her. The woman I once built a life with, shared dreams with, defended. No, I said slowly. I just don't believe you deserve me anymore. And I meant it, because hating her would have given her power. But this was freedom. Back at home, I poured a drink. Same whiskey, same glass. But this time, I toasted to something new. Not victory, not revenge. Clarity. Because when someone shows you who they are, believe them. And then build something stronger in their shadow. Northlight Holdings had just acquired a second property. Beachfront. Rundown. Full of potential. Like me once. But I'm not rundown anymore. I'm the reckoning. And I've only just begun. A week after the vote, Rebecca texted me. Can we talk? Just the 2 of us. No lawyers. No board. She had the nerve to frame it like that. No lawyers. Like I was the one playing games. Like I hadn't spent the last 3 months watching her dismantle our life with her brother's hand halfway down her ambition. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because I knew exactly what this was. She wasn't trying to make amends. She was trying to salvage whatever power she had left. Probably still thought she could twist this into some noble, we just grew apart story for the public. Control the narrative. But I had already stolen the pen. Later that evening, she showed up at the Sedona property. Unannounced. Uninvited. But not unexpected. I watched her step through the doors of the half-renovated lobby, eyes scanning the polished wood, the stone fixtures, the rising empire she hadn't touched. She was dressed down this time. No designer heels. No Prada bag. Just jeans and a blouse. The kind of authentic look you wear when you're trying to sell sincerity. But I knew better. You came to admire the future? I asked, leaning on the front desk, paperwork in hand. Her eyes flicked to mine. I came because I'm tired of fighting. You didn't mind it when you were winning. She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. I made mistakes. No, I said. You made choices. Let's not insult either of us with euphemisms. She walked slowly through the space, brushing her fingers across the fresh oak beams. This place that feels like you. I nodded. It is. There was a pause. Heavy. Hollow. Then she turned to face me. I want to sell my shares. I raised an eyebrow. Why? She hesitated. Because I can't sit in boardrooms where my name gets whispered like a threat. Because Chase is under investigation, and they'll tie everything to me. Because the brand is bleeding. Oh, there it was. She wasn't here for closure. She was here to cash out. You think I'll buy you out? I asked. You're the only one who could afford to, she said. Quietly, I walked around the desk. Slow, deliberate, until I was inches from her. You had it all, I said, voice low. The business, the name, the history. And you torched it for what? Power? Control? A man who calls you sis, in public and baby, in hotel rooms. She didn't answer, just looked away. And that was enough. I'll buy you out, I said finally. At 75 cents on the dollar. Her head snapped back. That's insane. No, I said. That's mercy. She stared at me like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Because the man who loved her? He wouldn't have let her sink this far. But the man standing in front of her now? He was here to watch her drown. The paperwork was signed 3 days later. I didn't even blink writing the check. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about the message. She was gone. And for the first time in a decade, the company, the legacy, was clean. That night, I sat out on the balcony of the Sedona property. Sunset bleeding into the rocks. Whiskey in hand. No ghosts. No tension. Just silence. And peace. A rare thing for a man who crawled through betrayal to get here. And you know what? I earned every damn sip. The ink had barely dried on Rebecca's exit agreement when the call came. It was from Daniel, my private investigator. Now, Daniel doesn't call unless something's bleeding. Usually he just emails. Neutral. Professional. Cold. But this time? He called. Hey, he said, voice low. You're going to want to sit down. I stayed standing. Tell me, you remember those transfers from Elridge discretionary funds? The ones tied to Chase? Yeah. Well, there's more. I waited. You weren't just funding hotel junkets and overpriced consultants, he said. You were funding someone else entirely. I felt the floor shift a little. Who? There was a pause. Then, a girl. 7 years old. Lives in Tampa. The mother's name is Delilah Everett. Worked as a front desk clerk at the Charleston location. I blinked. Hard. Delilah. The name hit like a brick. Back when Rebecca and I were barely holding it together, during one of those months where I was working 16-hour days and she was visiting family, I had met Delilah. She was sharp, quiet, lonely in a way that mirrored mine. There was one night. Just one. A moment of weakness, of exhaustion, of needing to feel human. I never saw her again. Never heard from her. Never knew. Daniel cleared his throat. The child's medical bills, they're being paid through an Elridge expense account, hidden under regional wellness incentives. But it's consistent. Monthly. My mouth went dry. And the timing lines up? I asked. Perfectly, he said. You need a paternity test to be sure. But he didn't finish. He didn't need to. That night, I sat alone in my study. Lights off. Just the hum of the night outside. A daughter. Rebecca knew. She had to know. She must have found out somewhere along the line. Maybe she hired her own investigator. Maybe Delilah reached out. I don't know. But one thing's clear. Rebecca had kept this from me. And not out of mercy, but out of leverage. She was waiting. For the right moment to use it. Maybe to twist the knife. Maybe to burn what was left of my name if I ever turned on her publicly. It was never about the child. It was always about control. I booked a flight to Tampa. No lawyers. No entourage. Just me. Delilah still worked in hospitality. Different chain now. When she saw me in the lobby, she froze, like seeing a ghost. I'm not here to accuse you, I said. I just need the truth. She took a breath. Swallowed hard. Then nodded. We sat in the employee lounge. Small, clean, quiet. She didn't try to run. Didn't deny. She's yours, Delilah said. I didn't want to ruin your marriage. But after the diagnosis, she has a heart condition. I didn't know what else to do. I sent a letter. To your wife. Of course she had. Rebecca intercepted it. Paid the bills. Silenced the source. Buried the truth. Delilah looked up at me, eyes glassy. I never wanted your money. I just wanted her to have a chance. And that's when I saw her. Through the window, out in the parking lot, sitting in the back seat of a car. Drawing something with a purple crayon. Blonde curls. Same nose as mine. I stepped outside. She looked up. And smiled. Not because she knew who I was. But because sometimes, kids just know good people when they see them. I didn't say anything to Rebecca. Didn't need to. I'd already won the war. But now I had something else to fight for. Someone. I flew back from Tampa with a mind like a war map, one half scorched by betrayal, the other suddenly lit with something I hadn't felt in years. Purpose. A little girl I never knew existed. Mine. I had spent months fighting for control, for truth, for justice. And just when I thought I'd reached the summit, there she was, this unexpected heartbeat, drawing pictures in a parking lot like she wasn't the final, quiet answer to all of it. Her name was Sadie. Delilah had chosen it because her grandmother used to sing old Appalachian songs with that name in the lyrics. She said Sadie was gentle, bright. Wired different, she said. She doesn't yell to be heard. But when she looks at you, you stop pretending. Yeah, I knew that kind of look. I didn't tell Rebecca. Not out of mercy. That ship had long sunk. But because Sadie didn't deserve to be used as a chess piece. Not in some drawn-out war between a bitter ex-wife and the man she underestimated. Besides, I had already taken everything Rebecca cared about. Her reputation? Shot. Her stake in Elridge? Sold. Her brother? Facing indictment. What else was there to take? Her ego. And she was doing a fine job gutting that herself. I started driving down to Tampa every weekend. Quiet visits. No announcements. I didn't stay at fancy hotels or fly private. Just a used Jeep I bought off a buddy and a cheap room off the interstate. Simple. Unnoticed. I'd bring coloring books, puzzles, sometimes little wooden toys I carved myself when the nights got too quiet in Sedona. I never introduced myself as her father. I just showed up. Delilah never asked questions. She let Sadie take the lead. And Sadie? She didn't ask for anything. She just let me be there. And that was enough. Meanwhile, Northlight Holdings was growing fast. The Sedona property opened with a clean, modern rebrand that wiped the floor with everything Elridge had become. No fake glamour. No overbuilt spas or soulless lounges. Just warmth. Stone. Firelight. Spaces for solitude and spaces for conversation. We weren't a hotel chain. We were a refuge. And people came. Writers. Survivors. Artists. Widowers. Folks rebuilding their lives with nothing but a duffel bag and a worn-out soul. I saw myself in every one of them. Then, one evening early spring, desert wind kicking up red dust, I got a letter. No return address. Just one line in Rebecca's handwriting. I know about Sadie. I stared at it. Let it sit on my desk for a full day. Then I burned it. Because whatever game she was still trying to play, it ended the moment she mailed that envelope instead of showing up. That's what cowards do. They mail things. I started the paperwork to formalize things with Sadie. Not to take her away. Not to disrupt the quiet rhythm she had with Delilah. But to step in. Legally. Permanently. Presently. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just cleaning up a betrayal. I was building something real. Something worth handing down. And I was going to make damn sure Sadie never had to learn about trust the way I did. Through fire. It happened on a Sunday. I'd just gotten back from Tampa. My third weekend with Sadie. We'd spent the afternoon building a makeshift birdhouse. She wanted to paint it purple with green stars. Said birds didn't like boring houses. Smart kid. I hadn't even gotten the dirt off my boots when the intercom buzzed. Sir, there's a woman asking to see you, the receptionist said. Says it's urgent. I didn't need a name. Some instincts, you just don't lose. Rebecca. She stood outside the Sedona property's front doors like a bad memory waiting to be reactivated. Black sunglasses. Designer trench coat. Hair perfect. The same posture she always used when she wanted the world to think she wasn't falling apart. But I could see the cracks. The way her fingers clutched her purse like a lifeline. The way she didn't walk, she hovered, like her feet weren't quite sure if they belonged here anymore. They didn't. You've been dodging my calls, she said. I don't owe you anything, I replied, stepping onto the gravel path outside the lobby. She took off the glasses. Her eyes were bloodshot. Maybe from crying. Maybe from losing. Don't do this, she said. Do what? I asked. Build something without you? Exist. I never wanted this to be a war. No. You just wanted to win without firing a shot. But people like you don't win. They borrow. They scheme. And when the game turns against them, they cry truce. She swallowed hard. I know about her. There it was. The pivot. Sadie. I said, folding my arms. You knew about her before I did. And you hid it. Used it. Paid Delilah off like a liability. I was protecting our marriage. No, I said. You were protecting your image. And you lost that the moment you chose your brother over your husband. The silence hung like a guillotine. I loved you, she whispered. No, I said, voice low. You loved what I gave you. The empire. The name. The life. She blinked, quick and hard. I made mistakes. I made foundations, I snapped. You made excuses. She tried one last time. Stepped closer. softened her voice. We could still fix this. You and me. No titles. No board. Just. I actually laughed. Not cruel. Not mocking. Just sad. You think this is a movie? I said. You think there's a scene where the wounded king takes back the fallen queen and they ride off into the credits? She looked away. And then I finished it. This isn't a second chance, Rebecca. This is your exit interview. I turned and walked back inside. Didn't look back. Didn't wait for tears. Let her stand there. With nothing. Because some people need to see the closed door to understand they locked it themselves. That night, I sat with the final draft of a document I'd been working on for weeks. Northlight Foundation Trust. Sadie's name was at the top. Not as a beneficiary. As heir. The Sedona property would go to her one day. Every expansion project. Every investment. Not because she was my legacy, but because she was the first thing I ever built without compromise. The letter arrived by courier. No return address. Heavy paper. Real ink. The kind of thing that smells like old secrets and people who think silence is a virtue. Inside? Just a name. Miriam Elrich. And a handwritten note. There are things you were never told. Things I never had the courage to say. If you're ready, come. M. Miriam. Rebecca's mother. My former mother-in-law. We hadn't spoken in years. Not since the wedding. She was always distant, even then, like she was watching the ceremony through glass, waiting for it to shatter. Rebecca once told me her mother had emotional gaps. Said she didn't believe in hugs or apologies. Just rules. And legacy. But I always had the sense there was more to it. Turns out I was right. Her house sat on the edge of a coastal cliff in Oregon. Gray siding, white shutters, porch swing that hadn't moved in years. She opened the door herself. Looked smaller now. Thinner. But her eyes, those cold, sea-gray eyes, still had steel behind them. Come in, she said. No hug. No smile. Fitting. She made tea, like that would make anything feel normal. Then she sat across from me, hands folded, and got to the point. I knew about Rebecca and Chase, she said. My throat tightened. How long? Since they were teenagers, she said. It started young. I thought it was trauma bonding. I thought I could fix it. Jesus. You let them run a company together. You let her marry me. She nodded, eyes dry. I did. Because I thought she'd stop. That if she saw real love, stability, she'd leave it behind. I stared at her, stunned. And you never said anything? I was ashamed, she said, barely above a whisper. And I didn't think you'd believe me. Who wants to hear that their new bride is tangled up in something that, unnatural? I stood, walked to the window. The ocean beyond looked endless. Cold. Why now? I asked. She looked up at me. Something like guilt in her eyes, but more fragile. Like a regret that had aged into bone. Because you were the only one who ever tried to save her without trying to own her. And she destroyed you for it. She reached into a drawer and handed me a folder. Inside, old therapy records. Letters. A sealed affidavit. If she ever tries to come back, use this. No media. No trial. Just leverage. I didn't open it. Not yet. I just looked at her and asked one last question. Do you still love her? She stared into her tea. Yes, she said. But I don't trust her. I left that house heavier than I'd arrived. Not with anger. With clarity. Rebecca wasn't born a monster. But she was raised in silence. And silence, left long enough, rots into deceit. Back in Sedona, I locked that folder away. Not because I needed it right now, but because storms don't always end. Sometimes, they circle. And I wanted to be ready if one ever tried to come back through my door. Northlight opened its second location that week. Smaller. Mountain-facing. A retreat for people who didn't want to be found. I stood on the deck that night and looked out over the valley. Somewhere, Sadie was sleeping peacefully. And for once, so was I.